We're a little bit of the antithesis to AI, even though we do have AI within our platform. And like I said before, we use various tools that have AI in them internally. Our focus is on the human to human experience. And in some cases, I think AI overtakes that a little bit and disrupts what we really crave as humans, which is speaking with another human.
Welcome to the 13th episode of the AI Space Podcast. Are you a founder, innovator, or technologist trying to grow or scale your startup or business with AI? Well, this is the AI show for you. We invite trailblazing founders and leaders in the AI space who are pioneering growth and scaling with AI to share their amazing journeys, innovative approaches, and battle-tested real-world insights with us. I'm Sanjay Kalluvilayil, co-founder and CEO of Stonehaas Advisors, your trusted advisor for AI founders and businesses looking to drive innovation, disruption, and value creation. Well, I'm excited to have Tomer Azenkot, CEO of vee24 here. vee24 is a software company specializing in digital customer experience solutions, enabling an omni-channel platform that integrates live video chat, text chat, AI-enabled chatbots, co-browsing, and appointment scheduling to enhance customer engagement across industries. First of all, welcome, Tomer. Here on the AI Space Podcast, we highlight game-changing insights that drive innovation and help businesses to scale. What do you see as the hottest trends in AI for 2025?
Well, first of all, Sanjay, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having this chat. I think there are a whole bunch of trends. Some of them are related to our business directly at vee24, and some we use as a customer, and some not so related. One thing that we're seeing all over the place, I think, is the prevalence of co-pilots, different co-pilot types of technology. So assisting people, we use at our engineering team different technologies to help them be more efficient, to help them have less mistakes or bugs, be able to kind of follow them with their work and get a better outcome in the end. So that's definitely a big thing that we're seeing. In vee24 space, what we're seeing a lot of on websites in terms of customer engagement is automation of various types of processes that used to be very manual and very time-consuming or human intensive. So we're seeing a bunch of different types of automation. We can dig into that, of course, as we speak now. Some of it, I think, is really good. Some of it, I think, is a little bit unfortunate and taking away from the customer experience. But I think, like with all new technologies, there's always a good and a bad side to it.
I definitely appreciate that, and we'll definitely dive deeper. So, what insights have you seen that founders and businesses or executives are using? How are they using AI to grow and scale their companies?
Lots of different ways. One thing that I think is already embedded into everything that we do, with tools like Gmail switching on different types of AI, is being able to look at data and getting more quick insights out of that data. So a few weeks ago, I noticed in my email that Google knows how to highlight when an important email message comes up and be able to have a little note at the top of my inbox, for example, to say you should think about looking at this email first and make sure you don't miss it. So I think founders and executives and really everyone there's a lot of immediate impact that we're seeing in our day to day. I know one of the topics you'll want to talk about is democratization. As you mentioned before, I think technology in general, but AI specifically, democratizes a lot of various benefits that we're looking for out of software by making things a lot easier to implement and more available to people.
Hey folks, exciting news. DataCamp, one of the world's top AI and data science learning platforms, is exploring a partnership with the AI Space Podcast. We not only bring you game-changing insights, we now offer you training and certifications that can truly level up your career and life path. So whether if you're an individual seeking to level up and secure a new role in AI, a founder or technologist seeking to scale up your AI expertise in architecture, or an enterprise leveling up your team for upcoming AI initiatives, DataCamp delivers unique user experiences so that you can learn data and AI through interactive hands-on coding, from home or anywhere. Follow career and skill tracks to take you from beginner to job ready. Work on real-world projects and build a portfolio that stands out. Earn certifications recognized by Databricks, Microsoft, AWS, and other leading companies. DataCamp's new Associate AI Engineer for Developers track is live. You'll build production-ready AI systems using OpenAI, Hugging Face, LangChain, and Pinecone. You'll also learn to ship chatbots, semantic search, and recommendation engines with real-world LLM ops. So if you're seeking to build with the latest AI developer tools, developing AI applications is also live. So make sure to use affiliate links in the episode description below to sign up for DataCamp and start building your AI advantage today. We have an awesome agenda for you. Like every week, we discuss strategy and mindset, what does it take to be successful entrepreneur, startup, or business, technology architecture, how to architect and integrate AI into your technology stack. We talk about business scaling, what are cost-effective strategies to seed and grow your business, ethical and responsible AI, how to balance innovation with accountability, AI democratization, how can we broaden access, empower others, and encourage unique perspectives. And then finally, some words of encouragement for those of you that are grinding in each day to build a viable AI initiative or business. The ultimate goal, we hope you gain a wealth of game-changing insights to grow, transform, or scale your business, initiatives, and society to new levels and dimensions leveraging AI. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got here? Tell us a little bit more about vee24, and then maybe you've been around for a while, so now you kind of have a different approach to AI. So let's talk about that. Tell us a little bit how you got into AI and how you started vee24.
Sure. So I joined vee24 nearly 2.5 years ago. I didn't found the company. The company's been around in its most original form since 2006. It went through a number of pivots. I think it's fair to say that in its current form, it's been around for just over 10 years. My background is I've always been in software. Early in my career, it was in software for the broadcast media space. So with video being a big part. And then more recently, I was in a few digital companies, so focusing on the customer experience online. And vee24 presented an interesting opportunity for me of marrying those two worlds. So taking video and taking digital customer experience, bringing them together with video chat and co-browsing that we do. So that's one of the things that attracted me about vee24 when I joined 2.5 years ago. Um, vee24's perspective. So we, in some cases, we're a little bit of the antithesis to AI, even though we do have AI within our platform. And like I said before, we use various tools that have AI in them internally. Our focus is on the human to human experience. And in some cases, I think AI overtakes that a little bit and disrupts what we really crave as humans, which is speaking with another human. AI is still beneficial in many ways for those human to human experiences, but that's really where we want to be and focus on those use cases where the human to human connection is really valuable, and perhaps AI maybe disrupts that a little bit.
I agree with you, but I've had some recent experiences where it took me 30, 45 minutes to get to that human interaction. So if I can, especially if it was an accounting software issue, right? So I need to get that solved fast. So maybe that's where the automation and some of that makes sense until I can get to the human, right? So I'm not waiting for that call back. What do you see as what do you s- so what are some of your target segments, some of the use cases for vee24?
So, like I said, we want to focus on those use cases where you really want to talk to a human. We do have tools within our platform to help make sure that you get to the human when necessary, and maybe not get to the human when not necessary. So, like you said, if you've experienced before, let's say a contact center call system, or some kind of customer service tool where you basically keep on pressing the zero to try to get to an agent, or you know, trying to talk into the phone, say, speak with a person. We do have tools to help make that more efficient and kind of route you down the right route so that your problem is solved, and reduce the time to resolution as much as possible. The use cases that we focus on are ones where you really do want to speak with a human. So it's generally more complex, and maybe higher value if it's a sales use case. I like to think of it as two buckets. One is where seeing a product or service on video adds a lot of value. So, for example, you're buying a car, or if you're buying an expensive piece of jewelry online, you probably want to see those items before you make any decision, even if you're in the research phase. The other bucket is where you're speaking with an expert or some sort of authority where it adds a lot of value to actually see the person. Many of our work calls, for example, it's really valuable to see the person for the same reason why we're on video at the moment. Hearing is fine, being on the phone is fine, but being able to also see the person, see their facial reactions, being able to see when they smile and when they maybe frown adds a lot of value. So one example is in financial services. If you're speaking with your financial advisor, if you're speaking with your banker, especially when documents are being exchanged during the call, it adds a lot of value to be in a digital engagement that incorporates video and co-browsing.
And I think that's also a very important insight is, one of the things we want to do on the show is make sure we separate hype from, reality. We want to make sure what's real. And everyone's saying AI or automation, whatever. And I think we can't lose that human touch. So what are you seeing around some of the metrics when somebody's able to get to the human versus, I'll give you my pet peeve for the last 20 plus years. I call in some place and you're in this endless loop of they give you five and it's like, then you get back to the main menu. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I'm like saying agent and then I'm yelling rep, I'm trying to every variation to get to a human being. Right. And then when I do get to a human being, I've already typed in my, whether it's social security number, some ID. And then they ask me the same question. Like, didn't I just type all that information in? So maybe you can answer the question on how you enable that, and then what are some of the metrics around that? So that give some folks out there that's like, hey, it's not just pure. Let's get them to a chat bot, right? What happens when they get to human? How does that improve the business overall?
Yeah, so there's a lot there in your question. You mentioned the IVR systems or the phone systems, which are often challenging. And there's often, as you described, a lack of continuity if you communicate it across multiple channels, right? So the word omni-channel is often used for being able to communicate with your customers across different channels. So, for example, that can be the phone, it can be email, it can be a chat with a bot or a chat with a person. It could be asynchronous channels that are becoming more prominent, like WhatsApp or SMS or maybe a Facebook Messenger. Many of our customers, especially in the retail space, put a big emphasis on being able to continue the conversation regardless of what channel that customer is on. So maybe the customer initially comes in through Facebook Messenger, then continues their path to purchase on the website, and eventually has some emails going back and forth. Giving the agent or the sales rep the tools to be able to see that entire conversation across the different channels is really powerful. Where video comes into play is in those use cases where you really need to see something, and to add even more to that, co-browsing, which is kind of an old technology that's been around, but I think really underutilized. Being able to share my screen with you, for you to share your screen with me, and also to be able to collaborate on the same screen. So I can basically grab a PDF, drag and drop it onto your screen. I can scroll for you. I can highlight a field for you. I can even type, and you can do the same all while I'm doing it. So to have truly a collaboration, which is not a new technology, but you don't really see it that much, and it can have a lot of value in various use cases.
That makes sense too. And had to do that recently, especially with my QuickBooks and had the accountant come on and we have a joint session and they're showing me where to go and do all these things so that makes sense. I think one of the interesting thing too is everyone's like trying to be an AI company, but I think you use AI judiciously where it makes sense, right? So in what use cases does it make sense to use an automation or a tool or AI versus getting to the human, right? Obviously there's advanced cases, but even on some of the tell me, yeah, explain to our viewers when it makes sense, when and where it makes sense, right?
Yeah, so let's take the retail world just because I think it's straightforward and we're all familiar with the customer side at least of the interaction. If I, for example, placed an order on an e-commerce website a few days ago and I want to check the status, maybe I have an order number, going to the chatbot, asking the chatbot, what's the status of my order, maybe giving it an order number, and then being able to see the status. That's a type of interaction that's very straightforward and doesn't require a human involved. In fact, it's probably easier and better without a human involved because it's just a very quick interaction. No need to explain the background. Any type of FAQ style question and answer is also typically, the bots do it well enough. There's no reason to invest in a human getting involved if it's frequently asked and if it's a simple answer. Where AI doesn't do well is if, for example, let's say I want to buy blinds for my house. I have 30 windows in my house. I know absolutely nothing about blinds. I know there are many options. The catalog is enormous and it's a very visual product, right? I want it to look good and not only look good generally speaking, but also be a good fit for my the windows I need to dress in my home. So video call is incredibly valuable for that scenario. Jumping on a video call will enable me, the buyer, the customer, to see the showroom, to see the different options. The expert with whom I'm speaking can browse me through the catalog, get an idea for my budget, understand what type of materials I want and don't want, and kind of narrow it down and guide me to the right places within the catalog. And then the two-way video adds a lot of value. So seeing me on camera and the windows in my house help the seller understand what would make sense for me in terms of interior decoration, in terms of the size and the fit. So something that you traditionally can't really do over the phone, you would have to go into the store. You can now do over video, which is more convenient. It's especially more convenient, within our busy lives. Maybe my wife and I need to be on the call at the same time and we're in different locations. So we can both jump on the call from our respective offices, for example, during the day. Um, and maybe it's also a multi-step interaction. So maybe I did go to the store and I did make the purchase there, but then there are some adjustments that need to be done a few weeks later, and I don't want to go to the store again. I don't want to spend that time. So being able to jump on a call, be able to troubleshoot things over video is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, especially I think when things are a little bit more standardized or people know what they want, it makes sense, right? When it's a little bit more customized or there has to be require a little bit more interaction, then you really need that human touch. When we talk about omni-channel across all channels, etc., right? Maybe I'm in my car and somebody called me back and I'm on my phone, and then I finally get back to the home and get back on my PC. I want that seamless transition, right? How does your company enable like a seamless transition? Because you mentioned earlier WhatsApp, maybe there's other tools and you don't own all the tools, right? So how do you kind of enable that seamless interaction in a sense?
Yeah, so we provide the capability to communicate over those different channels. Our platform, so from the agent perspective, from our customer, not the end consumer, but our customers, the company, they have a single dashboard that unifies all the communication across those different channels. So the agent can see, the initial conversation was over the phone, then it transferred over to, let's say, WhatsApp Messenger, and maybe it was finalized on the website, on within the chat widget on the website. They're able to see it all in a single dashboard. They can build reports on it. They can understand where they have bottlenecks, where they're the most efficient, and where they see the best results. You asked in the question before, and I didn't answer. What are some of the impacts that we're seeing? So there are many, many different types of impact. Conversion rates are much higher when you greet people with a video and a smile on a video versus expecting them to self checkout. But those numbers are a little bit biased because people who are more likely to buy, I think, self select into the video workflow to begin with. What I think is very illuminating is not only is the conversion higher, but also the average order value with our customers. It's incredibly higher when video is involved. In some cases, as much as 5x what it would be without video. The reason for that, I'll give you another example, another use case. So we work with a large furniture chain here in the Northeast, and um, let's say you're on their website, you're looking to buy a sofa that, let's say, costs $2,000. You could go through a self checkout, find the sofa that you like, and let's say you were in the store previously, you know what you want, and you buy it. If, however, you hop on a video chat with one of their associates, and by the way, it can be an ad hoc engagement. So browse the website, click chat, begin video, or it can be a scheduled virtual appointment. So you can, through our software, you can schedule the appointment for a later time and day. But you begin that engagement, the person will jump on video. They're at one of their stores, so they'll be able to show you the different sofas that you may be interested in. They can, sit on them and show you what it's like, give you their opinion. But in addition to that, it also is incredibly easy for them to upsell you. So right after they show you the sofas, like they would have done if you were in the store in person, they would show you the rugs and the coffee tables and some cushions and whatever other accessories they sell along with sofas. So the that easily helps increase average order value and in the end of the day also customer satisfaction.
Yeah, no, we'll continue this conversation. But before we continue, I want to invite everyone to follow Tomer Azenkot, like, comment, subscribe to the AI Space podcast because it helps us grow and have more impressive guests like Tomer. Going back to what you said earlier. I worked in a situation where I was told to go manage a call center and effectively babysit, and I said this is ineffective, and so came up with the call center incentive program. But one of the things I found out is, a lot of times people call in with problems and they're very unhappy. And they had, let's say it's a telecom package, right? What we trained the agents to do was solve the problem. What they s- the person was very unhappy. They solved the problem. They're happy now. We also taught the agent, hey, maybe the reason you're having some of these issues, this package isn't the right package for you. So they would find a better package or upsell a package. So now you've have an irate customer that's now happy, and now you gave them a better package and they're actually even happier, right? Because now you're not going to have the associated frustration of waiting. This is like 20 years ago, right? 30 minutes, an hour online to get into a call center to get your problem solved. And so that makes sense. That I think that was an example where that really changed. They had better conversion rates and more revenue at the end and decreased call center costs.
Yeah, yeah, it makes total sense. We see it all the time. I think it brings up another topic which we see in the case that you describe. It was the same person or the same team that dealt both with customer service as well as maybe with sales. And we see kind of the evolution or the next phase of those flows is to separate the two. V24 is incredibly focused on helping sales flows. Though we do also customer service in some cases, but there are a lot of tools out there that really focus on customer service. And that's actually an interesting topic for AI to begin with, because in customer service workflows at contact centers, one of the main objectives is to reduce cost. You have a high volume. You want to minimize the time to resolution. You want to minimize the amount of human interaction that is part of that. And I think that's fine, right? So automating as much as possible for customer service is great. But on sales, it's typically the opposite. You want to spend as much time as you can with the customer, because that increases your chances of closing the deal and maximizing the value of the deal. So being able to route between the two paths, sales versus customer service, is actually a good application for AI as well, to make sure that the person, another thing is also salespeople are often very different in nature than the customer service people. It's a very different type of persona. And the last thing you want, when you're running a team or running a business, is for your customer service people to be selling and for your salespeople to be doing customer service. You would not get good outcomes doing that. So being able to route the person to their needs, to have their needs met, is a really good application for AI, and that can be done very quickly without human intervention.
And I think you kind of answered my next question really, because you mentioned you had agents and those are human agents, right? And when does using maybe an AI agent or agentic AI make sense? And especially for some of the simpler type things where you don't need that human touch, but also maybe also routing it to the appropriate group, right? You said there are different skill sets. Sometimes the customer service people are the best to at least identify they're problem solvers, so they can identify the problem. They may not have the sales capabilities if they can hand that off to the sales folks. But as long as the sales folks are not over promising either, then the service people are unhappy because salespeople tend to overpromise, and then the customer service people have to deliver that. So there's a yin and yang around that. So, I think those are good insights. I do have a question for you, not to put you on the spot. Obviously you're, successful. Now we're at a point where we're getting some great guests on the show and who are, successful and have a, good following, etc. So was there anything about this show, the AI space podcast, that resonated with you and made you want to be a guest on the show?
I think that the biggest thing is the topic itself, right? AI is on everyone's mind. And at V24, sometimes it's a little bit of an uphill battle because we're not necessarily leading with, we're that new AI company that's going to revolutionize what you do. Instead, we're kind of leaning back on maybe a more traditional approach, if you will, or something that you're already doing. Our The way we use AI is to help empower the humans that are already doing the job. So various types of ways of assisting agents or salespeople. But the real core is still the human to human experience and the people that are involved. But I've come across, especially in the last, let's say, 12 months, maybe 18 months, I've come across many instances where we see people who have been directed or leaders who see it as their purpose to find the AI tool that's going to help improve their business. When I think the reality is that, like you said before, there is a lot of hype there, and I don't think that's the right way to think about it. I think AI is the enabler and not so much the outcome that you should be looking for.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's why I was excited to have you on the show too. It's like, you know, I think we got to use AI judiciously, where it makes sense. And we got to retain the human element. We've always talked about that. Even today, I had somebody tell me, yeah, I've heard you need AI and you can do this with AI and all this stuff. I was like, well, actually, for what you're asking, don't really need automation or AI. It can actually, your Excel spreadsheet works just great. And if you introduce AI, just more complexity and cost, and will your people be able to manage that complexity if they don't have an internet connection or they're on the road? So where it makes sense, and that's why I think that's important to get that message out. Is that you don't have to be this AI and everything's AI, and because that's going to be too complex and too costly. In the approach where it makes sense, where it can add value, and yeah, like you said, somebody's trying to find that tool. Well, you find that tool the next week, another tool comes out, and you're told, DeepSeek comes out, and then Llama 3 comes out, and another tool comes out. That's going to be the cycle for the next couple of years. So you got to find out how you're actually adding value to your customer base and growing the business, right?
Absolutely, totally agree.
Okay, very good. In terms of what's important, and you're a successful CEO and you're building a company, right? As a CEO leading a successful company, let's talk about vision and mindset. What do you think are the critical insights that you can share around vision and mindset for long-term success?
Wow, good question. I think there has to be a strategy, and it's the mainly the CEO, but the leadership team's role to follow a well thought out strategy and track different leading indicators and KPI that help make sure that everything is on track. Um, so I think that's at the core. You also have to kind of like in chess, think a couple moves forward. So you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're, the technology is no longer relevant or you've been replaced by something that is better, cheaper, faster than what you can do. So that's always top of mind, I think, for anyone in tech. Um, but generally speaking, being able to have a solid plan that looks forward a few years and be judicious about following that plan and tracking everything that needs to be tracked in order to make sure that you're on the path, I think is critical.
Yeah, no, that's great. Everyone, a lot of people do have a great strategy, at least on paper, on PowerPoint, right? And they have a technology architecture, right? But what have you seen has been, how does somebody really grow and scale a business, right? The hardest part is getting to those initial clients and those customers. So what is your approach on that?
I think keeping the customer at the center of everything that you do is always key. I've had a lot of success building really strong relationships with customers, and not being seen as, just another vendor, but rather as a partner. And I have many examples and cases of people I've done business with across multiple companies. And a big part of that is the relationship that we built. So I think putting the customer at the center of everything that you do and thinking, customer first approach, I think is critical. The second thing, as a leader, and I think personally, this is what has contributed a lot in my career, is making sure that the top performers or the key people on your team are happy and loyal and committed to the same goals. So that you don't have cases where the top performers are leaving, especially at the worst time possible. At the end of the day, especially in software, it's all about the team. That's all you really have. And with the right team, you can do really big things. So those really are the two things. I think everything else, I think, is secondary, if at all.
I think those are very important insights, especially around the customer, but it's a good reminder about your team, right? Especially the top performers. I've seen a lot of companies, what they've done is, they have their top performers and they hit their metrics, and then what they do is sometimes add new metrics and promise these large numbers, but then the top performers like, I'll never hit those numbers. They just made it out of reach for me, and you demotivate people, and it creates this vicious cycle. I think that's something we have to avoid. I've seen so many companies destroyed from that type of mentality too. But thanks for that reminder about the team and keeping your top performers and you know making sure that they're getting what they need to do to get their job done, right?
Yeah, and I think in both when it comes to your customers as well as when it comes to the team, you have to be thinking long term. I can say that today, of the, let's say, 5 people, including myself, who are on the leadership team at V24, I've worked with 3 of them in the past. So it's myself, 3 people who I've worked with in the past, and one person who I only met at V24 for the first time. And it wouldn't surprise me if that one person that I met at V24 for the first time will be working together at a future company at some point. So, not trying to get the quick win, just like with the customers, the same is true internally as well, and kind of having a very long-term view, and really, playing the long game, as they say, is I think really important.
Yeah, I think it's also to to differentiate that that's not cronyism or anything like that. That's like you're successful and you're brought into a situation where you need to be successful. You want people that you can trust, you built a relationship with, that will get the job done, and you don't necessarily have to babysit to get something done. And I think that's a important differentiator there. So no, that's great. Um, in terms of yeah, I think one thing that reminded me too, I was recently speaking at a Gen AI event in Austin, and everyone was talking about technology, etc. And the crux of my talk was, if you're not solving a pain point that resonates with the customer and that they're willing to pay for on a repeated basis, then there's something wrong. Because then you allocate limited resources and you engage in value destruction, not value creation, right? Because they focus on technology, the strategy, but are they really solving something for a customer, right? Solving a pain point that they're willing to pay for? Then you're burning through cash, you're burning through resources, other things, right? And I think if you can solve that and you bring that up, is engaging that customer base to be able to do that is critical to growth, right?
Yeah, and it's easy to get lost and forget about that. That's I think the main reason why companies have a mission statement or a purpose statement, right? You have to remember why you're doing it, what is the problem that you're helping solve, and make sure that the your ICP or the types of organizations you want to work with are the ones that have that problem. So to make sure that there is that market fit across the board, and that you're also communicating it in a way that's easy to understand.
That's an important term you mentioned, ICP. Any business that's starting out, especially. I mean, if you're Coca-Cola and you've been around for 100 years, you can spend millions and billions in advertising on mass, customers. That's great. But if you're starting out, you have to identify your ideal customer profile, the buyer personas, what are their behaviors. They say, I say the niche target, the target market or niche markets, but other people pronounce it. But the way some people say the riches are in the niches, right? And so you have to find that client base that you can really solve a problem for, and then on a repeated basis do that and scale that, right? If you're trying to customize 100 different solutions, you're never going to be able to grow or get standardization and to be able to scale a business if you're trying to be everything to everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of our struggles at vee24. So we did a big strategy session about 6 months ago where we we said, look, we're spread too thin. Our product is the same, but we're trying to have the same value across many different verticals, many different types of industries. I'll give you an example, which is kind of very different from what we go after today. We help provide the customer service at Heathrow Airport and a couple other airports in the UK for a company that delivers that. So if you got off a plane, for example, and let's say you realize you left your wallet on the plane and they shut the doors already, you're kind of at a point in stress, and the last thing you want is what you described before, where you call and you say, agent, agent, agent in the phone call system. Getting someone on video will help ease that situation where you're stressed out. So the company we work with has these big QR codes across the airport. They also have a way of reaching them through the web, but you can basically scan the QR code with your phone, and a human will pop up on video on your phone within a few seconds, and they're connected to the airlines and will be able to help troubleshoot your issue. So that's a great use case on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's very narrow, and we can't, being a relatively small company, we can't spread across all these different types of use cases. So we got together about 6 months ago, and we decided, these are the top three verticals that we do want to target. And while it's very difficult to walk away from others, at least in terms of being proactive about them, it's something that you have to do. You have to be targeted. You have to be focused. Otherwise, you'll be left with nothing.
I think that's very important insight. Everyone wants to get as much money as possible. You got to really prioritize your customer base. Your top tier, second tier, third tier, because the ones that are paying a lot and they probably leave you alone, and you generate a lot of margin. And sometimes it's the lowest level that pay the least, have the maybe almost negative margin, and have more headache in terms of customer service. And sometimes you have to filter that out and make sure, does this make sense for me? Can I deliver the experience that they required based on that cost basis, right? It has to make sense for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So, we are talking about AI, so let's get into the technology section, right? So for, what is your approach to integrate and implement AI we've talked about this a little bit, but practical and scalable. So where are you going from here, right? Going forward in 2020 into 2025, 2026, what's kind of your approach?
So it is one of our key focuses to add more AI into our platform. So I think of it as a two-pronged question. One is one part of the answer is we're using various AI tools internally, like I mentioned before. So our engineering team, we recently redid our website, and we did that with an AI tool, which was just mind blowing how easy it was to launch a brand new website, and also dramatically reduced our ongoing costs moving forward. So there was that. And then on the other side, within our platform, where do we have opportunities to incorporate AI? One part is on the agent dashboard. So one thing I'm very excited about is giving agents more tools so that they can be more effective at their job. So, for example, being able to do on the fly research and what we call agent assist in the contact center space. So as the agent is having a conversation with a customer, they have various tools that help give them insight, whether it be competitive comparisons or more deeper information about a product or about a topic that's being discussed as they're discussing it. So, for example, let's say our customer is a car manufacturer that's selling direct to consumers, and on a conversation, and it's a hypothetical story that actually happens all the time. Their customers telling them they're comparing the option of buying one of their cars with another manufacturer's cars. So on the fly, the agent will have information surfaced to them as they're speaking with that prospective customer, advising them what are the key differences, where their vehicle has some distinct advantages. So that type of data ability to gather data and present it in a clear way is something that is very difficult to do, fast enough as a human, but it's a really good application of AI. Another thing, kind of in the same vein, is sentiment analysis of the conversation. So being able to identify what went well and what didn't after the fact, or even during the call, being able to understand what are some of the things that maybe you're not picking up on in terms of the sentiment of the customer. Again, a really good application for called big data and things that AI can do, but very difficult to do quickly as a human.
I think that's important because I'll give you an example. Like, say it's a telecom customer, right? You call in. It would be nice for the agent to have some sort of co-pilot or some assistant saying, "Hey, this person's been with us for the last 5 years. They have an LT lifetime value of this. They're a valuable customer. Their sentiment's usually been good, but we've noticed the last week they've called 3 times for the same issue, and we're not able to solve it." And to be able to solve those issues, and they're about to, I mean, I've had a situation where I even told the telecom company I was going to churn from them, threatened them 3 times, and they didn't do anything about it. So I finally churned, and so solving those situations, I think that's where AI or having that information at your fingertips to help solve some of those situations makes sense, right?
Yeah, AI can really spoon feed just the way you described it. AI can really spoon feed those critical data points to a rep where without AI, without that assist, they wouldn't be able to understand the big picture.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So for the I know you're CEO, but for the tech wizards that are trying to craft their AI empires, what cutting edge tools or frameworks do you think are essential for building a bulletproof AI ML architecture or stack? You know, or at least your approach to that. What do you see as that you maybe you're interacting with your CTO or other folks? Uh, what do you see going forward?
Well, I think, like we talked about before, focusing on the problem that needs to be solved first, not coming from the angle of let's build some AI to do something cool. That's critical. I think there is there are big opportunities for various types of copilots. So maybe looking at the various areas where you spend a lot of time doing maybe some simple activities where a copilot can really help reduce the time that it takes, especially if it's something that's repetitive, meaning it happens many times in the day, meaning you can save a lot of time. I think that's how I would think about it, and that's when we're looking at what our customers are doing and trying to identify pain points, one of the key aspects of those pain points is how often do they happen. So that's something that I would look at, just generally speaking.
I think from our conversation, we want to maintain the human interaction when it makes sense. Use a copilot to augment the human in terms of giving them information to help them improve the user experience, the relationship, the interactions, right? And that's where you say the video communication makes sense, especially in more complex situations. And then I think one of the things that is interesting too. What are your thoughts on like brick and mortar stores? How do we connect with them with remote customers, those types of things? So, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, so lots of thoughts about that. I think one of the mind-boggling things for me is that the associates at the brick and mortar store, for almost all, let's say, commerce companies, are totally disconnected from what's going on the website. Your interaction as a customer on the website and the eventual interaction, or maybe it was prior to that interaction at the brick and mortar location, are completely disconnected in almost all cases. And it's not only in commerce. If you think about how you interact with your bank, it's identical. The branch versus the website or the app. So we're trying to empower the store associates to connect with people on the websites. If there is a contact center, being able to transfer that contact center call to one of the stores over video. So the contact center person may not be well equipped to answer all questions like the associate at the store may be. Um, and also brick and mortar locations, depending on the business, but often are not always busy. They have their ebbs and flows when it comes to foot traffic, and those ebbs and flows can be inverse to what's true about the website. um, you know, Middle of the day, you're much more likely to be browsing a website than you are to go to a store, especially if you work in a desk job. So um, I think that's something that organizations need to think about. And then if I look at the reverse, what brick and mortar do really well, and the folks owning the website experience need to be thinking about, is the overall customer experience. When you walk into a store, you're often greeted by someone, especially if it's more of a boutique or, let's say, high value good. You're greeted by someone with a smile. You're asked if you need any help. The experience, on the other hand, when you enter a website, is typically silence. There's no one there to greet you. There's no, smiling person that asks you whether you need any help. And I think that's broken. I don't think it makes sense for the brick and mortar. It doesn't make sense for the website. That's ridiculous. So we want to try to help each improve where improvement is needed. Um, but I think there are big opportunities on both, and I think eventually, for most businesses, that division, or the line drawn between website and or e-commerce versus retail, will be blurred, and it'll be the same team that operates across both, and there won't be this mindset, let's we have an e-commerce team and we have a retail team, and they're separate, sometimes competing even. That's kind of a thing, I think, of the past now.
Well, especially on the car side of thing, it's like you go into the car dealership, it's way more expensive than if you signed up on for the internet salesperson. And so then you're competing against each other. Well, who talked to you first? So those are challenges that still need to be sorted out. You talked about obviously where it makes sense, agents, co-pilots, right? But obviously you're engaged in customer relationship management in a sense, the CRM processes, and they're not all just just monolithic. There's different systems across the board, right? Are you using any sort of workflow automations? And like you said, you used a tool to build a website, right? Are you using anything, these no code or workflow automations going into the future?
We're not. We do use a CRM, but not a workflow automation tool. We do have customers, however, that where V24 is integrated with various tools like that as part of their flow. So V24 helps the engagement, but we don't really want to manage the workflow or the CRM data. Instead, we want to push whatever engagements happened as data points into those systems. And sometimes it's through a workflow management tool.
So is it like automation? Like when you hook in, is it automation tools, API calls? How do you enable that for your customers, right? To get whatever they need to do, especially for folks out there that are trying to still wrap their head around this, right, going forward.
Yeah, the most common integration is with the CRM, and in fact, V24 can even live within the CRM. So in cases where, let's say, again, in banking, where the customer data is really critical for the conversation that's being had, um, I think it makes sense for V24 to be embedded within the CRM, so that the banker has the CRM open on their screen, and V24 is a widget or a plugin within that CRM screen that they have open, because the engagement is one part of the big picture that has a lot of data in it. So that's kind of the typical one. The CRM, BI tools is another kind of bucket. So we have valuable data. We want to push it to another tool that can aggregate data from multiple sources and present it in a good way.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question. Then are you able to embed it? So you're also able to push business intelligence data, so that way the end user can visualize the metrics or the KPIs or whatever to make better decisions. That's great. Okay, well, very cool. So let's transition from technology. We talked about it a little bit, in terms of democratization, right? I think AI, there's a lot of opportunities. Whether you've been in it 10 years or 2 years, I think kind of people on a level playing field. What do you see some of the key challenges and opportunities making AI accessible to people from a variety of industries, perspectives, experiences and backgrounds. How can we bridge the gap? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think any technology, AI included, helps level the playing field, help democratize. You don't need 30 years worth of experience in order to be able to use an AI tool. And the more technology we have in our lives, the more level the playing field is. One thing that I think is a challenge, and I think in many cases we don't quite understand it yet, is the cost of running AI. I mean, certainly if you're a savvy investor in technology, that is something that is top of mind for you, and also if you're in the data center space. But I think for a lot of people, they don't quite understand what cost would be if you're looking at large scale of running heavy AI process. So that's something that I think, for various applications, may be a limiting factor at some point, if not already. Um, but you know, that's relatively minor, I think. The big picture is that the more AI becomes embedded in every aspect of our lives, the more everything is democratized, really. It's already a challenge, I could say, in the world of B2B sales. If you went back 20 years, it was really important to have a long history of networks and connections, and have the quote unquote Rolodex. Today, that's almost not a thing anymore, and when you get an email from someone trying to sell you something, you don't know if it's a human or if it's AI. So I think there you have total democratization, which maybe even is a bad thing, um, compared to how it was, certainly 5 years ago, if not 10. But overall, I'm a supporter of these trends, and I think they're good for society.
No, I think you're right, especially some of these tools like whether it's ChatGPT or some of these image creation tools. It opens up a lot of opportunities. I've been playing with a lot of these things. LLMs. I'm undercover AI artist. Creating images and work on workflows. But you are right about one thing is there's a cost to all this, right? OpenAI secured billions, Perplexity secured billions, right? To build all this stuff, which is cool. And yeah, it's cool that we can maybe for $20 a month access it. But then if you have two or three LLMs, you're on two or three AI image creation sites, and then you're on Kling and all these other things, and you do like automations and all this stuff, it gets expensive, right? And the question is, do you have a powerful computer to be able to have your own? I just recently downloaded the latest Llama, but I have a 64 gigs of RAM, and I'm not even an IT guy, and I have a NVIDIA GPU, etc. But even some of the models are too heavy for my computer, and I had actually asked it. What was cool is I asked an LLM, "Hey, here's a screenshot of my computer um, system capabilities." It assessed it and said, "Yeah, the Llama 3, the 5 quantized version probably work better, 8 billion parameters, etcetera, not the 80 billion." Right? And so I'm running it now on my thing, and I've even downloaded Comfy UI to do some images and stuff like that. So to manage some of the costs, be able to do that, and also privacy of data and other things. But I think hopefully as, you know, things get in the next year or two, the models are not as heavy in terms of some of the system requirements, but I think it's going to get heavier, but also maybe a little more cost effective as we go forward too. I think it's going to go both ways, right? But I think understanding there are costs to be able to do all this stuff, even as an individual user, or as a company too, especially you. If you're trying to run it and you have a bunch of API calls and tokens that are being generated, the volume of that quickly can add up to millions of dollars, or at least several $100,000. But especially the more volume you do, millions, and that's something you have to watch in terms of a cost perspective, right?
Yeah. Things that scale quickly are also dangerous when it comes to managing the cost of goods. I was talking to a friend a few days ago who's a doctor and researcher, and we talked about using ChatGPT for work, and he asked me, how do you deal with the fact that it's so slow? And I kind of looked at him perplexed because I've never had an instance where I asked ChatGPT something and it took, more than a few seconds. But he runs a bunch of research using ChatGPT, and he's using big Boston area universities ChatGPT license, which is like the corporate one. And he'll sometimes put in queries that work for 12 hours. So it really depends what you're doing. And obviously at scale, if you have a large company where you have many people like him, then you have a problem. Um, so it depends, but you do have to be mindful, cognizant of the fact that when things scale fast, if they grow fast, and you're using something that is GPU intensive, for example, that you could find yourself in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, I think that's also important if you're on a platform or a shared platform, like even on some of these image creation, depending on the plan that you're on. If you're on the basic plan, you're going to be put in a queue with a bunch of 100 other people that have sent their image, right? So it could take 5 to 15 minutes for your image to get generated, unless you're on like a premium plan. So I think those are things that are. And then if you're at a university, yeah, there's probably several hundred people submitting some stuff, heavy, intense research papers at the same time. So yeah, that can be pretty compute intensive, right? Um, in terms of ethical AI, going forward, how can we balance AI innovation and fast time to market with ethical and responsible AI governance and development? Especially from your perspective, there's customer information, there's customer interactions, there's client information, all that kind of stuff, right? So, what are your thoughts on that in terms of balancing innovation and then ethical and responsible governance, right?
Yeah, we're very careful. We have plenty of regulation that is keeping us honest when it comes to GDPR and things like that. But I think in general, you have to be careful. You have to be careful of hallucinations as well. You don't want the AI giving the wrong answer, and sometimes that can be dangerous depending on what it is. Um, so that works in our favor in many ways at V24. But when it comes to being ethical about it, you have to be, first of all, upfront when it is AI versus when it's a human. A lot of times, you say you're a human and people don't believe you. In a LinkedIn message conversation, for example, that's happened to me a couple of times. And that's because people aren't ethical about it in some cases. Um, in terms of customer data or private information, you definitely need to be very careful about it. You don't want any of that leaking in any way. And I think luckily there's a pretty good regulation in place and various types of certifications that as an organization you can go through in order to ensure that your processes are up to snuff.
It's kind of funny you mentioned about the whole AI thing because this is one of the few shows where we're actually talking to real people and it's not AI generated, etc. Right? And it's funny. I think we posted a reel. I think it was on TikTok or someplace, and somebody commented, we're talking about AI and all this stuff. They're like, we can still tell you're AI. I'm like, and I'm like, why did they post that? And I looked at the video and I think in one some part is a little bit choppy. So they must okay, maybe I could see that's why they thought it was an AI, but no, we are real. I'm not an AI generated avatar talking, neither is Tomer, at least I think. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's great.
We will get there. We will get there at some point in our lifetimes, I think, when a conversation like this, watching, you won't really know whether that was a real person or not. We're not that far away from that, unfortunately.
I actually have a use case for where I haven't deployed an AI avatar myself, but I've trained my voice. I have an image, and so it's coming out next week. Where I'm going to announce exploring a partnership with a leading AI and data science platform. And I actually wrote out the script. They wanted to approve the script, so I wrote it out. I put it in one platform. I had it generate the speech for me, and hearing it, I could see, okay, I need to change these words because it doesn't make sense that way. And then I can actually even have an AI avatar read it out to me, so that way it helps me proofread it. Because there's one thing when you read it versus when it's spoken out, and when you're busy, you don't have the energy to go make a speech. So I'm using it in that way to help me kind of like vet some of my scripts in a sense. So and then, yeah, I may use some AI stuff down the road, but in terms of stuff like this, real world insights, I don't think AI can replace that, at least not for now. Especially, what you have real world insights for many years, but also from B24 the last, 2.5 years, right? So that can't be replaced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I think we're coming to the end of the show. Any final thoughts, insights, encouragement to those that are seeking to get into space or struggling to build their business?
Well, I think, again, broadly speaking, I think to those who are thinking about um, leveraging AI, I think embracing technology is always a good thing, but don't try to take shortcuts. AI is not going to help you, um, get that shortcut and without consequences, if that's what you're looking to do. For those people who are currently running businesses and they're thinking, do I spend the resources on having that human to human interaction versus AI? I would just challenge them with one thought, which is how are you, like we discussed a few minutes ago, how do you expect to treat people who are walking into your brick and mortar location? And then how are you treating them on the website? And I don't think if your answer to that is on the website it's different, or on the website people don't want to speak with a person because they're not face to face like they are in the store or in the physical location, I think you need to reconsider that answer.
Yeah, no, I think, I feel like we can talk for quite a bit, a couple more hours, and especially I appreciate your insights around the omni-channel digital human, digital customer experience solutions. But I think the important point around it is that human touch, right? And I think that's something we can't forget in the AI space. And and we're coming up with time. So, where's the best place for people to learn more about Tomer and about V24 or connect with you?
Yeah, so go to our website, vee24.com. That's vee24.com. You can actually contact us using our tools. So we drink our own champagne, and we do use our tool on our own website. So you can kind of get a two for one by both interacting with us and also learning about the company that way. And best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Very easy to find.
Yeah, I like how you use I like the value-based branding of that, drinking your own champagne versus eating your own dog food. So, I like the way the way you put that. So, awesome. Everyone, make sure to check out and connect with Tomer Azenkot. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yeah, make sure you subscribe, hit those notifications. Find us on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, etc. Tomer, I've learned a lot from this episode, and I appreciate your perspective. Make using AI when it makes sense and relate to the human touch. So thank you for that. Thank you for being on the show. And then I'm your host Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehaas Advisors. I hope to gain a wealth of game-changing real-world insights to grow, transform, and scale to new levels and dimensions leveraging AI. I hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.